I mean, there's no excuse not to have the word of God now. There's no excuse. I mean, it's everywhere. I mean, you can hear it. And that is true. Anyway, we're going to go back in the book of Job tonight. We're going to be in the book of Job. We're going to start in chapter 2. And we are at that place tonight in the book of Job. Oh, by the way, did you read chapter 1 and chapter 2 of the book of Job? Have you read those first chapters? Yeah, we went through them. Do you remember anything about them? I'll ask you this. How many kids did Job have? 2? 10? 10 total. How many boys? 7 boys and 3 girls. That's right. All right. Now, something else about Job. Did his wife agree with him? No, she did not agree with him, right? Now, what was the purpose that Satan had? What's he trying to get? What is he trying to achieve? To curse God. His whole thing is, I can tell you, Job is going to curse you. Now, why does Satan believe that Job is going to curse God? Because he knows why he's serving God. Why does he think Job's serving God for? All right. I got to write this up here. Everybody says this. God is good. Everybody says all the time, right? God is good, okay? Now, do you know what the average person believes that means? That means he's good to me. What happens when God is not good to you? What happens when everything you do turns bad? When everything goes wrong and God don't step in and lets all something bad happen to you? Are you still going to serve it? That's right. But that's Satan's issue. This is where we are in the new covenant, the New Testament, in our lives today. Why do you serve God? Most people serve God because they feel better, life is better, everything's good. But what happens when everything is bad? Are you going to serve God? Do you love God in the good times and the bad? Especially when you know that what's happened. God let this happen to you. You see, we don't even think of it like that. I've said these things to people and they will just, it's like that can't be right. This tragedy happened to me. So-and-so done me wrong. I said, doesn't God have a hedge around you? Then how did that tragedy happen? Well, God would never let that happen. Well, how did they override God, break through the hedge and do this on you? Did God let that happen? You know he did. But nobody wants to accept that. When you can't accept what this book says, when we don't want to believe something, well, I can't accept that part. Suddenly you are at a roadblock and you can't see the rest of the book. It blinds you. You have to accept what he says. Job is serving God because he's good to you. You're good to him. That's what Satan is saying. Does Job serve God for naught? You take away all that stuff and I promise he'll curse you to your face. Well, he didn't. But God wasn't finished. Remember, it wasn't Satan that came up with this idea. No, God's the one who came up with this. God is going to use a man very early on in the history of mankind to prove to you and I, guess what? You serve God because who he is, good or bad. In fact, we even read the other night where he said to his wife, why not receive all this good? Can't we receive a little evil from the Lord? Isn't that what he said? Let's go back and look at it. He says, what shall we receive good? Verse 10. Receive good at the hand of God, and shall we not receive evil? Now that's a scriptural point, right? It says that. So why can't you receive evil from the Lord? Well, God isn't evil and God couldn't do that. That's correct. It's not God. It is the perspective of the other. It's man and his perspective or her perspective saying that's evil. You see, we all think that something's evil. Everything to God is good, okay? Everything to God, he'll take care of it. It's all his will. But can't we get so what happens, we get to the end of this lesson last week, And Job's wife said, curse God and die. Now, that's something I didn't bring out last week, but I want to remind you that sometimes people think that death makes everything better. I'm out of my misery. I'm not hurting no more. I'm done with it. That's what everybody who commits suicide believes, right? On the way down here, I was listening to David Guzik, who said the same thing. He was talking about Klebold and what was the other guy? And the Colorado, the Columbine shootings, the two kids, and they made the video saying, yeah, I'm going to face my little judgment. And, hey, I'll be out of all this mess. Life wasn't very good to me, but it'll be better now. It's not going to be better. We're going to end up in hell. It's a judgment to come. But many people believe that there's no afterlife, and if there is, it's got to be better than this. So to those people who believe there's such a thing as, well, she is in hell on earth, that's a lie, brothers and sisters. There's no hell on earth. There is no hell on earth. Hell is a place where there's no hope, there's no return. How was it he said it? Your worst day ever on the earth is better than your best day in hell. And there ain't no comparison. We have gotten to the point where people think that the afterlife has got to be better than this. Anything's better than this. You just don't understand who God is. You've never seen a God like this. Sit down and let's go through Revelation and go through it again and find out what is God really like. So now Job has gone through this with his wife. He's lost everything. He's gone out to the city dump or the county dump or wherever they got the ash heap where they burn all their refuse. And he has sat down because now he's got boils on the top of his head and his ears. He's scraping them. He's just in misery every day of his life. What happens? Well, in verse 8, it says he took a potsherd to scrape himself with all, and he sat down among the ashes. Verse 11, now when Job's 3 friends heard of all this evil that was come upon him, they came every one from his own place. So Job had friends, and they come to check on him. It says Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar. Now these people are very important because the rest of the book, just about a lot of it's just about them. Eliphaz, was it Bildad the second one? Is it? Who's the third one? Zophar? Z-O-P-H-A-R? Okay, remember those 3 names because those are the ones, the main characters. Now, these are his friends. These are acquaintances, and they heard about what had happened to him. Now, each of them is unique, and they're going to have dialogue with Job. I'm going to read about their dialogue. They'll speak to Job. Job will speak back to them. And here's what happens. His friends heard what had happened. So, for they had made an appointment together to come to mourn with him and to comfort him. They want to comfort him, but they're going to mourn with him. You know what you mourn with people for? It's like he's dead. That's how bad this fellow is. It is like he is dead. They've come to comfort him, they're going to mourn with him. And this is a bad thing, isn't it? You got to imagine this is a bad thing. And the Bible says, and when they lifted up their eyes afar off, they knew him not. You know what that means? They didn't know him. They knew where he was at, but that's not him. That's not him. Has he lost a lot of weight? Probably not. But you've never seen him sitting with sackcloth and ashes. You've never seen a man with boils all over him. Probably what is one of those, in those days, the most disfiguring disease, of course, was leprosy, because it would eat off your nose and your fingertips, and you had all those ulcers all over your body. But Job, boils from the top of his head to the soles of his feet. And he's just itching, scratching them, and bursting them. And what do? There's no Percocet, no morphine, ain't got no fentanyl, ain't got no cocaine, ain't got no liquor there. And by the way, there ain't enough wine, ain't enough alcohol to take away all this pain. You just can't. Well, they lifted their eyes, they knew him not. And they lifted up their voice and wept. And they rent everyone his mantle and sprinkled dust toward the heaven on their heads toward heaven. No, that's morning. They weren't expecting to find what they found. You know, you hear the man in trouble, but you didn't realize it was that bad. By the way, have you ever seen that before? Well, ask any police officer. You know, I think those poor families that lost those kids and those adults this weekend on the plane that crashed off the coast, and they recovered. But think about the rescue guys. Y'all heard of that one this week? There was a small engine plane. 8 people died just off the coast of North Carolina. It went down. They couldn't find it. They found one body, and then they searched. They found body parts. That's like a policeman. Your fire engine, your ambulance, they're going to get there. The first person on the scene is going to be a police officer. And there are going to be bodies all over the road. And I've got a lot of police officers I've seen through the years, and they'll just tell you horror stories, things they wish they could forget, sights they've seen. But they've never seen nothing like this, because this man's alive and he's like this. And they're mourning right along with him. That's an anguish. I mean, this is somebody you love, and you couldn't believe what you saw. It was overwhelming. So they sat down with him upon the ground 7 days and 7 nights, and none spake a word unto him, for they saw his grief was very great. That's grief, brothers and sisters. By the way, have you seen anybody who was in grief? I'm sure you have. You ever seen a person grieving? I've seen. Sister Janet is probably the most powerful one in my life. When her son died, I remember going to that house, and we're just sitting there, and I looked at my watch. It was over a half hour, and we said nothing. This woman was crying, and we got a crowded room. We're all just sitting there, and nobody said nothing. We just sat and sat and sat. Her grief was so great. She cried so much she was just whimpering and still now, it'll choke you up. You just never seen grief like that. The other one was a 17-year-old boy when I was medical examiner. It's about 20 years ago. And he had died in a car wreck that night. They called me in to come in, and I was remembering the cries of a mother. And you've heard this before. Grief. People have a lot of grief. But I've never seen a grief this long. They sat down for 7 days and 7 nights with this man. They didn't want to leave him. He was in such anguish. You just can't imagine what they were looking at. And they didn't know what to do. They didn't speak to him. He was so overwhelmed. 7 days and 7 nights. I mean, how great a grief. Chapter 2 and chapter 3, when you get to the end of chapter 2 and take chapter 3, you've never seen an anguish in anybody in such a manner. Beyond to compare to what we would have. We think we're in trouble. You've never seen this. Look, after this, Job opened his mouth. Chapter 3, verse 1, and cursed his day. Job opens his mouth and he curses the day. Cursed be the day that I ever came to exist. What he goes into now is a dialogue that is, you begin to think of it as he's opening the dialogue of me thinking out loud. That's what he said. He's thinking out loud. So what does he do? He curses the day. And Job spake and said, let the day perish wherein I was born, and the night in which it was said, there's a man-child conceived. Job curses the day of his own birth. In other words, it is better not to be born than to have this happen. That's how bad his anguish was. He didn't just curse the day of his birth. He cursed the 9 months before when he was conceived. Cursed be the night in which it was said, there's a man-child conceived. He didn't just curse the day of his birth. He cursed the night mom and daddy come together and he was conceived. I mean, he's just backtracking all the way back. Cursed be the day. That's a man that is in difficulty. Now, we have the Kevorkians of the world who say, well, it's okay to take your life. You're in such pain. You're going to die anyway, right? Nah. You know, we often think that. Job's not thinking about killing himself. But there have been some godly men who've gotten like that, isn't there? Who was that man that got like that? What godly man was it? Elijah. He ran in the wilderness. Lord, I'd rather die. Let me die, Lord, for I'm no better than my fathers. Let me die, God. I don't want to live anymore. Yeah, you can get pretty bad. Job wasn't like that. Job was just thinking out loud. He's cursing the day he was even conceived. Let the day perish when I was born, and the night in which was said, there is a man child conceived. Let the day be darkness. Let not God regard it above all, neither let the light shine upon it. Cursed be that day. Don't let God regard it. Don't ever let that day be even remembered in history. Wipe it away, but you can't. That's what he wants. Let darkness and the shadow of death stain it. Now, he's using imagery here, okay? This is poetic language. There's a lot of poetry in the book of Job. And we know what he means by this in the context, what he's saying. When he says the word, let darkness and the shadow of death stain it. You know what I mean when you stain something. Let a cloud dwell upon it, and let blackness of day terrify it. Job is just simply cursing the day of his birth. Oh, what anguish this man is in. As for that night, let darkness seize upon it. Let it not be joined into the days of the year. Let it not come into the number of the months. In other words, Lord, just let it be blocked out forever. The day of my birth. It's a cursed day. He is cursing the day of his birth. I want blackness to cover it. I want the shadow of death to cover it. Don't want nothing to ever mention. Don't let it be numbered amongst the months. When you look back, it's a void that's there. Lo, let that night be solitary. Let that night be solitary. Let no joyful voice come therein. There's no joy in the life here. There's no happiness. There's not even an ounce. There's not even a smidgen. There's no hope in what he's looking at. Let them curse it that curse the day, who are ready to raise up their mourning. Let them curse that day. Wow. Let the stars of the twilight thereof be dark. Let it look for light, but have none. Neither let it see the dawning of the day. In other words, that day looking for light, never find none. Looking for the dawning, looking for the twilight, any light. You know what a twilight is and what the dawning is. That's when the daylight is either just barely seen going down or just barely seen going up. But don't let any light ever see that day. Anything he can say bad about that day, he's saying it, right? That's what he's saying. Everything about it I hate. I loathe. I don't want no light to see it. I want darkness to come. I want it to be stained. I want it blotted out. Because it shut not up the doors of my mother's womb, nor hid sorrow from mine eyes. That's what happened. It didn't. It didn't stop it. And it came. And it came. There's one other thing. Hold on just a moment. Any comments so far? Any comments? All right. Did I skip a verse in here? No, I didn't. All right, verse 11. Why died I not from the womb? Why did I not give up the ghost when I came out of the belly? I should have been miscarried. I should have not been able to be born. I should have died there. Or when I came out of the womb, I should have died then. Why did the knees prevent me? And why the breast that I should suck? In other words, I should have not been nourished just to die at my birth. For now should I have lain still and been quiet. I should have slept that I had been at rest. I want something else I want to point out during this entire dialogue. Has anybody figured out yet why God is doing this? There's all the different reasons you can say, but why would God be doing this to Job? Now I say that, go back in chapter 1 and look at this. Look at this. True. Did Satan come asking the question? In verse 8 of chapter 1, it says, hast thou considered my servant Job? God initiated the whole dialogue. Satan wasn't going to bring it up, but God did. And then the second time, he says, have you considered Job? That there's none like him? Chapter 2, verse 3. Verse 8 of chapter 1, verse 3 of chapter 2, both says, hey, Satan, come here. Have you considered Job? Have you looked back and seen what he was like? He brings it up. So he's going to prove something to Satan. Absolutely. What's he doing for Job? What God always does for every one of us. He's growing us. Everybody grows. Didn't he talk about being on milk and then being on meat? The troubles and the trials of your life work with patience. Paul the Apostle told the Corinthian church, hey, you should have been on meat by now, but I got to feed you with milk. We're supposed to grow. Job is going to grow during this time, okay? Job will understand far better what he's going through, but by understand the world and understand God by what he's going through. It educates you. It shows you more. You show me a great man, I'll show you great trouble in his life. That's just the way it is. Everybody that has trouble, great men, they've had it in their lives. So everybody that got trouble must be great people. No, because a lot of folks have trouble, don't listen to it. They don't learn from it. They don't try to. But Job's going to learn. Now, one of the things is this, and this is what I'm going to tell you. Look at that verse. How he says this. He says, for now, why did the knees prevent me? I want to read that from the other version. Why did the knees receive me? In other words, to put me on the lap, God, mama held me. Why did I get the care like that? Or why the breast that I should suck? For now should I have now should I have been quiet? I should have slept, then I had been at rest. And everybody knows there's no rest. Now, there are a lot of religions that believe when you die, there is a soul sleep, right? Now, the Jehovah's Witnesses believe this. That's one of their big things. The dead know nothing. And they take that from the book of Ecclesiastes, where it says the dead know nothing. We know that Paul the Apostle told the Corinthian church to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. But the rich man died. He lifted up his eyes in hell, right? By the way, do you know the soul has eyes? Yeah. He went to hell, right? Body in the ground. He lifted up his eyes in hell. Tongue. He could touch, right? He could feel. He had consciousness, right? Job said he would be at rest. So what's Job got to learn now? You got to learn about the afterlife. By the way, you know this man is thinking about death, doesn't he? He's thinking about it. And I can tell you, you can go forward into chapter 19, and you'll say, wait a minute, Job's made a complete turnaround. He goes from saying, you know what, if I'd have died, I'd have been at rest. I'd have been over with this. All will be gone now. He's going to learn about the resurrection, isn't he? He's going to learn that there's a resurrection. The Bible is clear. And as it is appointed unto men once to die, but after this, there's a judgment. In chapter 19, Job says, "For I know that my Redeemer liveth, and that he shall stand at the latter day upon the earth. My body, and though after my skin worms destroy this body," because he knew the worms would eventually destroy him in the ground. "Yet in my flesh," he says, chapter 19, "shall I see God." You know, that's why I say, if you're in trouble, it's the best time to learn God. Let God talk to you. As much as you're trying to figure out your situation, stop it when you can and say, "God, I know why me, but Lord, teach me, show me, God, because I got a clear mind right now, because I'm leaning on you real heavy right now." Because you want to talk to him about your present problem as opposed to saying, "God, teach me." Job is going to learn through this process. He thinks he's going to rest. He says, "With kings and counselors of the earth, which built desolate palaces for themselves, or princes that had gold, who filled their houses with silver, or as a hidden untimely birth, I had not been as infants which never saw light." Why did this happen to me? I'd have been at sleep. I'd have been at rest with the kings and the councils of the earth. I'd have been at rest with those who built ruins for themselves and princes that gold. I'd have been at rest. Or as the hidden untimely birth, I had not been as infants which never saw light. There the wicked cease from troubling, and the weary be at rest. The wicked cease from troubling. You know that's not true, right? By the way, you know there's no such thing as when you die that you're going to be at rest. Well, you know what? I've just killed these people. I ain't going to jail. I'm going to get out of this here. Boom. That going to help you? Oh, no. Suddenly, I'm looking at the judgment seat of God, casting me into a fire, torment, eternal. That's what happens. There's no such thing as rest for the wicked, and they'll be weary at rest. He says, there the prisoners rest together. They hear not the voice of the oppressor. The small and great are there. The servant is free of his master. He's thinking about dying, but he doesn't want to take his own life. He said, I wish I was dead. If I could have died before I was put on my mother's knees, if I could have died and she'd have never fed me, then I'd have been at rest with all the counselors and the great men, with the wicked men and all the others, and I'd be out of this misery. By the way, Job is in misery. Now you know why. If he feels like this inside, now you know why those men, 7 days they were out there like, God, Job is in trouble. You just have never seen that kind of trouble ever. All right, now, let's move to the last stanza. Wherefore is light given to him that is in misery, in life into a embittering soul? Why am I living? Why am I like this? Why would this happen to me? Have you had those kind of days in your life? Some of you may have been there when you say, God, I don't even know why I'm here. I don't even know. That's what Job is like. He says, in life and the bitter in the soul, which long for death, but it cometh not, and dig it more than hid treasures. I'd rather die than have treasures. I just want to get out of the misery I'm in. That's misery, brothers and sisters. By the way, did God permit this? Yes. He's sitting in the ash heap. What did he tell his wife? You speak as one of the foolish women. Boy, now he's here. His friends have come by. It's been a week later. He opens his mouth. You know, he's kind of getting to that point. I'm cursing the day I was born. I cursed the night I was conceived. And he goes in that dialogue about that day I wish it would never happen. Then he says, I wish I would never have been fed. That I could have died already. And then he starts in his last part here saying, why am I living? What good is this? What am I doing? Or the brother that says, ain't no sense in me going to church anymore. Why, brother? Man, these hearing aids can't pick up. I can't hear a thing the preacher says. I'm half blind. I can't even see. What good is it going to church? I can hear it a little bit, but I can't hardly hear what he's saying. I have to get up close like I'm here to you. What good is there going to church? And he's expecting everybody else, which what they know him says, yeah, brother, I can understand that there. And you're like, oh, you need to be at God's house. You know that, right? Because the book says so. Book says to be there, right? People love to, you get into yourself and you begin to think about yourself, and pride rolls in and you think of those things. That's what Job is doing now. He's only thinking about himself. He's going to have to come to grips with this. And this whole book is about the education of Job. When you get to those when you get to the end and God says, hey, Job, good question, but where were you when I laid the foundation of the world? Job, where were you when I hung the stars? Was you there? And I shut my mouth, Lord. He's got to get to that point. This is the growth of a man of God. And by the way, no matter how you are, you're perfect, upright, one that fears God, shuns evil, still can grow some. Never too late. He's learning. This is a man at the last, he says, why should I go to church? Why should I live anymore? I've had people tell me that. Why should I live anymore? Why should I? I don't mean nothing to nobody. Yeah, but I mean, you get those people, especially seniors. For some reason, they get like that and say, I can't contribute no more. I used to sing in the choir. I can't sing no more. I used to teach Sunday school. I can't teach no more. And I can't do nothing. I ain't no good to nobody. And Lord, them grandyoungins holding on to every word grandma says, you know. All them people that would love to hear from you, they can't. One of the greatest stories of that in my life was the night of you remember Dale Earnhardt died, right? That Sunday. Was that night? I was preaching a revival. It was at Island Grove. And before I went to preach, preacher stood up and said, Brother Harris, got one thing to say before we start. How many folks here, Sister so-and-so called up and invited them to church? Boy, half the church raised their hand. I said, brother, she ain't been to church in 3 years. She's been bedridden with a stroke. But every revival, she gets on her phone and she calls everybody. Don't forget, revival's coming up now. You need to be at God's house now. She invites everybody to church, even though she can't come herself. Said, tell me she ain't working for the Lord. More, the church day, everybody was shouting, just thank you, Lord God, for somebody that's an inspiration. Yeah, God's got you here. You got a purpose. Job is saying, no, which long for death, and it cometh not. Dig for it like hidden treasures. Verse 22, which rejoice exceedingly and are glad when they can find the grave. Why is light given to a man whose way is hid, whom God hath hedged in? God, why would you let me live? You've got me cornered. You've hedged me in. You didn't show me this was going to happen. For my sighing cometh before I eat. My sighing comes before I eat, and my roarings, that's groanings, are poured out like waters. Now that's imagery. Of course, that's poetic words of saying that it's poured out like water. My groanings, by the way, you take a pitcher of water and pour it like that there. Once you start how it flows, that's his groanings are like that. It just all flows. That's the way his whole life is that. It's nothing but misery. Nothing but misery. How can you think in the midst of all this? You start off like this, okay? For my sign cometh before I eat, and my roarings are poured out like waters. For the thing which I greatly feared is come upon me. And that which I was afraid of is come upon me. By the way, you ever notice that's how God does it? In my life, I can tell you the things I wanted all my life. I wanted it so bad. Never could get it. So guys, all the things I wanted, that's what I wanted the most. Can't get it. I don't know if you've been like that, if you ever noticed it. It's the way God is. Because if he gives it to you, what you're going to do? You'll only use it for yourself. You'll think about it for yourself. Now, if you see something you want to use for God, God gives that to you. Yeah, He will. But you got to be careful. You watch how God does it. All he's doing all along is just molding us. You've had trouble in your life, all that God's doing is just molding. Getting where you need to be. What I was afraid of, that's what happened. You know? Anybody, how many watched the movie? I know I did now. Raise your hand. Who watched Kung Fu Panda? 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, y'all got grandkids, aren't you? Got kids. In Kung Fu Panda, remember when he tells Shifu, he tells, I've had a vision. Tai Lung will escape. And he goes and run, tell the guards, double everything. And Shifu makes that statement. I love the writers of that movie with some of the things they put in there. He says, one often meets his destiny on the way to avoid it. As soon as he said that, that's Bible. That's exactly what it is. When God says something, you're not going to escape it. What I was afraid of has come to pass. You're never going to escape it. You're going to have to face what God says. And you can run away from it, but you're going to face it. It's going to happen. It's just the way it is. That's biblical. God says it's going to happen. It's going to, I don't plan on doing that. You're going to do it whether you like it or not. Every knee will bow, every tongue will confess. It's going to happen. Well, I'm not going to do this. God will make it where it's going to happen. You will find yourself doing that. But he said, what I was afraid of, and obviously this was it. He's lost his health, hasn't he? And by the way, let me say a word for, how can we say it like we used to say in the old days? They wouldn't say this. That's Brother Aaron. Now beside him, that's Mrs. Glenn Harris. That's what we call her, right? That's what we used to do it, right? Mrs. Job. Mrs. Job. Well, Mrs. Job has also lost all her children. She's lost all her wealth too, right? And she's lost her husband, the man that she married. And she's in anguish. And before you're too hard on her, remember, she loves her husband. And she is overwhelmed. What does she say? Curse God and die. You speak like the foolish woman. Then he turns around. I wish I was never born. But damn it. Saying the same thing, ain't he? I mean, you got to kind of look at this chapter and say, well, Job, you just told her we're going to receive a little evil from the Lord. But boy, when you get in the midst of it, it's different. You see, reality sets in. I'll give you one of the greatest ones of all that I've ever read in the Bible, and that's Jesus himself. When Jesus did his first miracle in Cana of Galilee, he will go down to Jerusalem, go into the temple. They're buying and selling. He overturns the tables and says, my house shall be called the house of prayer. And he said, destroy this temple and I'll rebuild it in 3 days. They understood not. They'd understand later on. From that time at the beginning of his ministry, he kept saying, destroy this temple, I'll raise it in 3 days. Until the night when he goes to pray in the garden. Lord, can this pass from me? I don't want to go. For 3 years, you've been saying you're going to go. Now you come in and you say you don't want to go? If it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Reality is different. Even Jesus shows us that because he is the Son of God, but he's the Son of Man. He's a man, and shows us that's the way we are. In reality, it's set in for Job. Jesus said, hey, not my will, but thy will be done. And God didn't have to beg him neither. God never spoke to him. He just went to praying, and God, angel, come here. And I strengthen my son. He needs to pray a little harder. He's praying. He's going to pray through tonight. Yeah, when you're in trouble and anguish, what do? Go to God and pray through. It's going to take it away, right? No, I still got to go to that cross tomorrow. But you know what? I prayed through and I'm in the middle of God's will. I can take that. Sons and daughters, no. Ladies, weep for your sons and for your daughters. Don't weep for me. Yeah. Perfect, clear. You got your mind right. But see where Job is, what he says, and look what his wife said. Job is in the middle of it now, and he's cursing the day he was born, cursing why he's living. Oh, the night I was conceived. Lord, don't let that number ever come up. That day ought to be blotted out of every calendar. All right. And I was afraid of it, and here it happened. I was not in safety. Neither had I rest, neither was I quiet. Yet trouble came. Trouble came and found me anyway. By the way, have you ever seen those people that go to church and always have the perfect life? Nothing ever goes wrong with them. You know there's someplace they ain't got no business, right? You know if you are a Christian, many are the afflictions of the righteous. It's going to happen. It's your perspective and how you look at it. I'm in the middle of trouble. David, how should I see that? Oh, I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. I fear no evil. Thou art with me. Really? How can you say that? Well, that's right. You did walk out on a battlefield with a 10-foot giant staring you down with a slingshot, didn't you? Yep. But God had proved it to me what he had done before. I killed a lion and a bear. What happened to you? God saved my soul. What can I? Greater is he that's within me than he is in the world. We are more than conquerors through him that loved us. So what can take us down? Bring on the trouble. I'm going home after a while. In fact, we got more assurance than ever. All right, so now we've seen Job's response to all that's going on. His three friends are there. They hear this dialogue from him. Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. Job has got to learn so he can understand all things. We're going to grow right along with Brother Job, okay? Now, any comments before we go to verse number 1 of chapter 4? All right, then Eliphaz the Temanite. Eliphaz the Temanite. Now, Eliphaz is unique. This guy is a religious guy. He's a man that says, I know God, and I know how church is, boy. Come on, you can learn from me, boy. I'll show you how a church ought to be. This is the way it runs. He's that kind of a man. He answered and said, now when Job says all this, each of them want to respond. They want to say, well, let me tell you something, Job. I got an understanding. You don't know this, but I'm going to help you out. That's what we all try to do, right? If we essay to commune with thee, wilt thou be grieved? But who can withhold himself from speaking? Eliphaz, if a man attempts to talk to you, are you going to be weary? But who can withhold himself from speaking to you? Surely, behold, thou hast instructed many, and thou hast strengthened the weak hand. By the way, his friends know this. They said, Job, now you've been a great man of God. You have instructed many people, and you've strengthened their hands. Thy words have upholded him that was fallen, and thou hast strengthened the feeble knees. Man, let me tell you who you are. Boy, you are a man of God. You are a perfect God. You've done all this for everybody else. But now it is come upon thee, and thou faintest. It touches thee, and thou art troubled. Someone's like, Job, I don't know why you can't take this. You strengthen everybody else, but you can't help your own self. It touches you, and you are troubled. Is not this thy fear, thy confidence, thy hope, and thy uprightness of thy ways? Your integrity, your hope? Remember, I pray thee, whoever perished, being innocent. Now we get to it. Hey, Job, you're in trouble. Now, whoever got in trouble that was innocent? People that's bad, they don't want to get in trouble, right? Whoever perished, being innocent, or where were the righteous cut off? Even as I have seen, they that plow iniquity and sow wickedness reap the same. Job, you got a lot of trouble. You helped a lot of people. You've helped people with feeble knees and weakness, and you've helped them. But now it come to your house. But I'm a religious man. I know how church is. And I know God. I've been saved longer than you've been saved, Job. So let me tell you a little bit about what's going on. God don't punish people that's doing right. Wicked people are the ones that get punished. That's the same thing we got in our counties right now. Amen. I used to hear them all the time. Boy, ride down Deep Branch Road, boy, the Lord has blessed our people. The big houses and the nice yards, and you get money. Yeah, well, the Lord bless them. The Lord bless them. We say it so nonchalantly. We have no idea the damage it does to the sinners. When they hear, listen, did you know how many Christian people are led astray by these charlatans on the TV that are taking the money, telling people about how to sow your seed of faith. I looked at the wealth of Paula White, and I used to listen to her every year. Sow your seed of faith at the beginning of the year. Sow your seed of faith. By the way, do you know why they're so heavy at the beginning of the year? Telling you to sow your seed of faith? Taxes. Sister, she's smart, buddy. Yeah, they're going to get a tax refund. Send us some of that money. You're going to get a lot for the rest of the year. Why? Because God always blesses good people. Nothing bad ever happens to them. That's what he's trying to say. Well, bad things happen. You must be bad, Job. Look, no. Those that plow iniquity and sow trouble reap the same. By the blast of God, 4 verse 9, by the blast of God they perish, and by the breath of his nostrils they are consumed. People that do wrong, God gets them. You know, you're going to reap what you sow, son. Bad things happen. It's got to be something like that. Let me stop for a minute and say this. If trouble comes to your life, always the first thing you do is say, God, what have I done wrong? You're trying to show me something. Always do that. I do it. Always ask God first. And sometimes God says, no, there's a purpose in this, but I can't tell you right now. But my strength is sufficient. My strength is sufficient. There are times when trouble is going to happen in your life, but God's got a purpose in it. I promise you. Well, God, how can God let something bad happen? How can anything bad bring something good? Any Christian that can't see that there, you know, you need to get to a church where they can preach and teach the Bible. Because that's what happened on the day that Jesus died. The greatest tragedy that mankind had ever heard. On the road to Emmaus, they said, have you not heard? Don't you know what happened in Jerusalem? Well, actually, I'm the only one that really does know what happened in Jerusalem. I'm the only one that really understands it. The greatest tragedy ever was the greatest triumph. That's the whole Christian faith, isn't it? I mean, that's the Christian faith. Something bad happened and something good come out of it. Right? Jesus prayed the night before. Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as thou wilt. Over and over and over again. See, we don't talk about that. You got to find. Preachers have got to start preaching it and teaching it and say, here's what it means. Because many people still believe this. Hey, look, God consumes them. The roaring of the lion and the voice of the fierce lion, the teeth of the young lions are broken. The old lion perisheth for lack of prey, and the stout lion's whelps are scattered abroad. Now a thing has secretly brought to me, and mine ears received a little thereof. And the thoughts from the visions of the night, and the deep sleep faileth of men. Fear came upon me, and trembling, which made all my bones to shake. Then the spirit passed before my face, and the hair of my flesh stood up. Job, let me tell you something. Man, I had a night when things was going tough, but in a spirit come by me. I got this revelation, boy. Let me tell you what happened. There's a spirit come by, and I seen it. Man, the hair of my neck stood up. I had an experience with God that you haven't. That's why I know what I'm talking about. We hear that all the time, don't we? I had an experience with God you ain't have. That's what he's saying. We hear that all the time. Now, this is Eliphaz giving his response when Job cursed the day he died, and he's responding to that, and he's implying, Job, now you've sinned. Come on. You've done something wrong. We're here for you. We're going to help you. I know what I'm talking about. You ain't never had a spirit pass before your face. I've had an experience with God. You ain't had that. You know how people say this? You know what? I was on the table. Brother Harris, they lost me. I was gone for 5 minutes. I was dead, and they come back to life. And I seen so-and-so, and I got a great testimony. And you know what Brother Glenn told him, didn't you? You ain't got no testimony, son. That ain't nothing. Let me tell you where I was. I was on the road to Damascus, hell-bound when God saved me. That's a testimony. That's a testimony. So we hear the same thing. Some experience you have, like that's something great. And you're trying to teach. Now, Job's got to listen to this from his friends. You know the old joke, with friends like this, who needs enemies? Hey, look, we'll stop there. It's 7:59. We'll stop there. We'll pick up there next week, okay? We'll pick up there next week. Let's start at verse number 11, brother. Yeah, we'll start at verse number 10. Let's say Job 4 and 10. That'd be the best place. Any comments on this? Does it make sense? Can you follow this? Can you see the big picture? You know, Job's wife said one line and Job goes in a whole dissertation. I think you got the same problem, Job. Yeah, anguish will do that when it sets in, man. And it does. But I tell you, if you've never seen anguish, read that chapter 3 and chapter 4. Oh, that's tough. All right, let's stand. We'll have a word of prayer and be dismissed. Thank you for your time. Thank you so much. God bless you.